Okay, I'm going to do these a little out of order. This is, I think, the third one you sent me. It says, here's the bivariate data set in which you believe y to be the response variable. It says, make a scatter plot of the data. Which point is the outlier? Yeah, absolutely. You don't really need to graph it to kind of notice that. It's the only one that's negative, and these are really, really large numbers, really, really large negative numbers when compared to everything else. So this should be obvious that this is your outlier. I'll show you in the next example how to graph it and kind of check from the graph. But what we're going to do is just find the regression equation for the set of data with and without the outlier. So, and then if the equations are very different, then that means the outlier does have an influence. So it's an influential point. If the equations are very similar, then it's going to be no, they're not. It's not an influential point because it doesn't change the equation. So what I'm going to do right now is pause the video and input this data, X, into my L1. Let me go over, highlight L1, hit clear enter. Highlight L2, hit clear enter. And it says the first thing I want is to find it without the outlier. So I'm just going to list all the data in L1, but not include this guy. I'm going to take this guy basically and just ignore him for right now. I'll use him again in a second, so I'll erase that in a second. But I'm going to pause the video and input the data. Whoops. Okay, I have all the data in, all my X and Y. So I'm going to go back to stat, over to calculate, linear regression, number 4. X values are coming from L1, Y values from L2. Just go down to calculate. So I'm going to copy these numbers down in Y equals MX plus B form. So I have Y equals, it says 3 decimal places, 1.521 times X minus 25.810. 810 or just 81 if you round to 3 decimal places. So there's my equation without the outlier. Now I'm going to add it back to my data. Go to edit. Don't clear anything out. Just go all the way to the bottom. Just going to add it. Oh, just going to add a new point. I guess it could have gone up. I'm going to add the outlier back in. So I'm going to add here negative 197.4, negative 326. Run the test again. Run the regression. Stat, calculate, linear regression. So now my equation is y equals 1.521 x minus 25.792. Comparing these two, I mean, they're almost identical with the exception of just the decimal here. And this decimal is very close anyway, 0.81 and 0.792. So they're almost identical. So even with the outlier included in the data, the equation doesn't change. So the outlier does not appear to be an influential point. It doesn't really have an effect on the equation. So that's all we're doing for these other guys. But if it's not as easy to figure out which point is the outlier, it looks like this one's going to be. This 51 is much different than the rest. But if you can't tell, you're going to make a scatter plot. So the first thing I'll do, which one's shorter? Let's see here. That's all right. I'll just do this one. I'm going to pause again and put X into L1, Y into L2. Okay, all my data is in L1 and L2. So now it says make a scatter plot, and which point appears to be an outlier. Once the data is in there, to do anything with a plot, you're going to go to the stat plot menu. I'm going to hit second Y equals. I'm going to go to plot 1. It's already turned on. Make sure it's on. Make sure it's selected scatter plot. And you want your X values from L1. You want your Y values from L2. If for some reason these are blank, I don't know why they would be, but if it's blank and you want to input L2, notice it's right here above the 2 button. So I'll hit second 2, enter. Okay, and now I'm going to hit zoom. If you have something in Y equals, there might be a graph that pops up. So make sure actually go to Y equals. Make sure everything's clear out of Y equals. Now I'm going to hit zoom, and I'm going to go to zoom 9, which is zoom statistics. There's our data, and look, boom, that is our outlier. right there. So I need to figure out which point that is. So I'm just going to hit the trace button. Trace. You'll see my cursor's right there. If I hit down or up, it shuffles. Hold on. Trace. Shuffle. It should shuffle through these guys. There we go. No. There we go. Hit left or right, it's going to shuffle through them. Just took a little bit. And keep shuffling until, there you go, your cursor lands on the outlier. There it is. Bing, bing, bing. 51.7, 5.5. I was right. So this is our outlier. That's all you got to do. This last question is the same thing, but you have to start by finding the outliers. So you would graph these. You're going to combine the two problems we just did. This is going to be an L1. This is going to be an L2. Graph them. Determine which one's the outlier. I don't know. This looks a little suspect. This looks a little, it doesn't matter. There could be a number of them. That's why you're going to have to graph them to figure it out. But this one looks a little suspect to me. Okay. Determine which one's the outlier. And then you're just going to run the test with it, run the test without it, and then just tell me if that point changes the equations or not. All right. And that's really it.